Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tina, and I am the Capability Building Coordinator for Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up is a part of the Info Exchange Group. Info Exchange is a not-for-profit social enterprise that has delivered technology for social justice for over 25 years. With over 100 staff across Australia and New Zealand, we tackle the biggest social challenges through smart and creative use of technology. I'd like to welcome you to the webinar Budgeting Tips for Not-for-Profits, which will be presented by Mick Devine from CalCSA. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type it into the questions box on your webinar panel and I'll be able to assist you through there. If you have any questions during the session, please also type it into the questions box and Mick will answer them in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. Please note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you are on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you shortly after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. We'd appreciate it if you took a few minutes to provide us with some feedback. That's all from me for now. I'll hand it over to Mick to get things started. Thanks, Mick.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking some time out of your day. I'll see if I can make it worthwhile for you. So what I want to talk to you today is just some suggestions on budgets, how to do things better, how to save some time with budgets. And I'm going to start with a bit of a conversation about spreadsheets and some suggestions there. And then I'll talk about how we do budgets in CalCSA, some of the tools we've got in CalCSA for doing very quick drafts of next year's budgets, for example. And then there are times when it makes sense to combine CalCSA and a spreadsheet and use both and get the best of both worlds. I'm going to talk about how you can involve the whole team or more of the team in the budgeting process so that it doesn't all sit on one person's shoulders. And then a bit of a talk about reporting on budgets and some of the things that you can do there. So I will be doing questions at the end. So if you put your questions in, Tina will look after them and I'll do my best to answer them when we get to the end. So let's talk about spreadsheets. I'm not even going to tell you when I first started using spreadsheet, but it was with a thing called VisiCalc. So that tells you how old I am. But spreadsheets can be very powerful and incredibly flexible. And one of the great things about spreadsheet is that you can do just about anything with it. But with that flexibility comes danger. They're notoriously prone to error. It's very easy to overwrite formulas. It's very easy to make mistakes. And I don't know if you're like me, where you've been rushing to get some reports out before a monthly meeting or something. You discover a mistake and it's 5 minutes from the meeting. So the easiest, quickest thing to do is just to type the right number in where the formula was, thinking I'll come back and replace the formula later. And you do the meeting, all goes well, and then you totally forget to go back and fix that formula, and you report that same number for 3 months in a row before somebody notices. Spreadsheets are great, but they need to be managed well. And one of the things that one of the tools that I came across probably a year or so ago was the spreadsheet review board. And they're a not-for-profit organisation, and ssrb.org is their website, and they have some great best practice guides on how to set up your spreadsheet. And a lot of it comes down to separation of assumptions from output and presentation, so that you don't have formulas in the same places as you're putting your data. You color different aspects of the spreadsheet in different ways, so that you can instantly look at it and know what's a formula, what's a number that you can just enter, what's a mixture of the two. And I'll show you an example of one that I use. Well, it's based on one that I use that I've set up just for this webinar earlier. And I think the other thing is that spreadsheets have a tendency to start off simple, but grow in complexity. You start off with just a single page or a couple of pages and some calculations, and then you produce a chart. And then somebody else says, well, I'd like another chart based on that same data, or can you add this in? Can you add that in? And before you know it, you've got this big sprawling spreadsheet with a multitude of pages. And then you pass it on to someone else, and they have no idea what you've done, how you did it, how you set it up. And so I think it's really important that even on a simple spreadsheet, you document things right from the beginning. You have a cover page that explains what it's about. You have a content page so you can easily move from one place to another, so that somebody who comes after you can understand the structure of it, and you can put sections in there. You know, you can have multiple tabs in a spreadsheet, and I think it's good to use them to break things up. And by having a content page, you can easily jump from one section to another, and then put comments everywhere. Put comments where you do formulas. Use things like range names, and I'll show you some examples of those when we get to have a look at the spreadsheet shortly. But make your formulas readable. And then it's about checking things. You know, Excel, Google Sheets, they all have tools that you can use to validate data entry. Sometimes it could be as simple as just doing some conditional formatting so that the cell changes color when you've got an invalid number in. You know, so if you're expecting a day of the month, you could have it change color if the number is less than 1 or more than 31, for example. Or you can create drop-down lists for cells so that you restrict what people can put into those cells, and therefore you increase your chance of having good data in your spreadsheet. And then there's the sort of checking for consistency. You know, one of the things about having rows and columns of data is that it makes it very easy to add things both directions. And if you've got a table and you sum the rows and then you sum the columns, you should come the same grand total overall. Just make sure you do that. And I think it's a good idea to have a page in your spreadsheet where you link to all those error checks, so that you can just go to one place and see everything is okay. And you know, I did see somebody, one of my clients last year had a great spreadsheet with a lot of error checks, and one page of it just had a column that summarized them all, and the ones that passed the check were green and the ones that didn't were red. So it was very easy to tell where the problems were, what was good, what was not good, and so that you had that consistency and you could be confident that the data in that spreadsheet was good. And then the other problem that happens when you have multiple people using a spreadsheet, and this particularly happens when you're doing budgets, in that you have different departments all have copies of the spreadsheet to do their part, and then at some point they all come together, and it may be one spreadsheet that you're all taking turns in editing. It may be copies of the spreadsheet that you then need to combine afterwards. But I think it's really important to make sure that you know which is the master version, which is the latest version, who's made changes. Can you go back? Google Sheets, I think, does the version control thing better than Excel, in that it does let you see what changes have been made on a particular version. One of the things that I like to do with my Excel spreadsheets is to have them in a shared Dropbox folder. And I mean, that depends a little bit on using Dropbox in your organization, but we use Dropbox and we have shared folders within the organization. And one of the things Dropbox does is save a version of your file every time somebody saves some changes. So you can quite easily go back, you can see who's made those changes, you can restore a different version if somebody's made a total mess of your spreadsheet. And then if you've distributed copies of the spreadsheet to different people in the organization, be careful when you combine them, and make sure that they haven't added rows, added columns, taken rows and columns out, because all your carefully crafted formulas can very easily fall over. So when I send Tina the link afterwards to the slides, I'll put in the link to the SSRB site, because it's got some great resources that anybody who's using spreadsheets, whether you use them for complex stuff or simple stuff, it's well worth a read. You know, some of it's a bit like reading accounting standards, and it's tedious and boring, but there is some valuable stuff there. And I think by being conscientious and disciplined about how you structure your spreadsheets, you make them much safer to use and much better for sharing with other people. It makes it easier for the person who comes after you in the job. So I'll show you my spreadsheet shortly when we get to that point. But let's first have a look at Calxa and how we do budgets in Calxa. Well, first I'll talk about it, then we'll have a look. So Calxa connects to MYOB Account Write, MYOB Essentials, Xero, and QuickBooks Online. So we pull data out of there so that you can do your budgeting and reporting. And I guess what we give you that a spreadsheet doesn't is structure, because we base it on that structure that's come out of your accounting system. So we take the chart of accounts, we take the jobs out of MYOB, tracking categories out of Xero, classes out of QuickBooks, and give you the ability to do monthly budgets by those, but then the flexibility to report on them in different ways. So you can run a report for one job or a group of 10 jobs or a header job, and you can do it in detail, you can do it summarized, and it's about, once we have that data, we've got a whole range of reports to look at it in different ways. when you're creating your budgets, the organization budget is the consolidation of the program budgets. So you only have to enter a budget once and use it multiple places. That's the concept. So it's about giving you tools that will make it a lot quicker and easier to create your budgets. Flexibility comes in date ranges as well. Sometimes your financial year might be July to June, but you get a grant from some, education's a typical one, where education department grants run January to December because that's their financial year. In Calxa, you can enter the budget. You just change the date range on the budget screen and say, I want to enter this for the calendar year, and it doesn't matter that it goes across the financial year. So it's about that flexibility, about working the way you need to work. So as I said, it'll never be as flexible as a spreadsheet, but that structure is really important in minimizing the risk of error and in saving you time, because it's automatically matched up with what's in your accounting system. And then when you're starting with budgets, especially if you're starting next year's budget, for example, we've got a tool in Calxa called the Budget Factory, which does bulk creation of budgets. So you basically select all your cost centers, programs, jobs, whatever you call them, base the budget on last year's actuals or even last year's budgets, depending on which you prefer. And then you can set a percentage increase for income, cost of sales, expenses, other income, other expense. And you can do this for multiple years. So we can do budgets up to 10 years ahead in Calxa, and you can use the Budget Factory to create a budget for 1 year, for 2 years, or 10 years if you want, and have different percentages for each year. So I'll show you that when we get in there, but it's about being able to very quickly create a draft. I've had clients who've had hundreds of jobs in their MYOB file, for example, and in less than a minute, we've got a draft of next year's budget. You then go in and fine tune it and say, okay, it's not quite as simple as a 5% increase on last year. This is not going to happen. This is going to happen. But you've got the bulk of stuff which doesn't change very much from last year, and that's done and dealt with, and then you only need to deal with the variations. So you focus your energy on the changeable stuff, which is where you ought to be focusing your energy. And then, as I said, there are times when it makes sense to use a combination of Excel and Calxa, because we don't give you that full flexibility. And so where you've got complex calculations to do, you can do an export from Calxa, open up the spreadsheet, do your calculations, and then import the data back in. And the import back in can be just a partial import. You don't have to import the whole chart of accounts. You can just select the rows that you're calculating, import those back in, and it updates those numbers but leaves everything else as it was. And I'll show you an example in a couple of minutes of how that can work. But it gives you that combination of the flexibility of Excel with the structure that you get with something like Calxa. And then delegating. And once you've delegated, you need to collate and bring everything together. And I think delegating budgets to program managers, to department managers, it's a good way of involving them in the process of having them feel ownership of that budget, so that they take responsibility when it then comes back to reporting on that budget later. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do that with Calxa. The first way is to add them as users and then set their permissions. And you can set permissions by business unit. So that's by job or by tracking category or by class. And so if a particular user has got responsibility for 3 different programs, you can give them access to just those 3 programs, and then you can specify whether they can just report on those programs or edit and report. And we have some clients that give all their department managers access to Calxa and give them the ability to edit their budgets and then report on them month by month. So they do their own reporting whenever they want to, without having to bother the finance people every time they want to report. I've got one client on the Gold Coast who they have their standard 5 user Calxa license most of the year round, but every March they add 10 users to their subscription, give them access to edit their budgets, and then in June, when the budgets are all finished, they remove that access, remove the 10 users, and the subscription goes back to the standard 5 users. So there's different ways of doing it depending on how you operate, the culture of your organization, but there is the ability there to involve other people in the organization in the budget process, but still be careful that they only can change the things that they have control of. The other way of doing that is to, if you don't want to give them access to Calxa itself, is to export the budgets for their department to a spreadsheet, give them the spreadsheet, and then import that back in once they've put the numbers in. And once it's in Calxa, because it's all at that cost center level and then all automatically rolls up to the organization level budget, there's no difficulty there in the collation of that data. You don't have that problem you have with the spreadsheet where you have to make sure that nothing's missing or nothing's being added in. So that's the general principles of how to get budgets into Calxa, and I'll show you some examples shortly. But first, let's just have a look at some of the reports that you can get in Calxa that will help you with your budget. So this one's just a simple actuals compared to budget, and it's showing actuals budget variance for the month and for the year to date. So that's not rocket science, but it's about having that there and available and easy to use. This one extends that by showing the full annual budget and what's unspent or unearned and the percentage that's been spent. And you can run this at the cost center level, you can run it at the organization level. Those of you that have multiple entities that you need to consolidate, you can also run any of these reports at that consolidated entity group level as well. And then sometimes you want to just summarize everything, and this report gives you one line for each of your business units, showing income, expense, profit, budget and actual for the month, budget and actual for the year to date. So it's a good report for senior managers, boards who just want an overview without having the detailed profit and loss report for every single budget. So have a look at that one when you want the overview, and have a look at the others when you want the detail. And then when it comes to reviewing progress of budgets as you go through the year, especially when you're reporting to boards with non-accountants on them, or even department managers who aren't accountants, and you know, you want to give them understandable reports so they can see what's happening. We have lots of charts, and something like this one shows you the year-to-date budget, and then the bars are the year-to-date actuals, so you can see how close you are to that budget line each month, when you're going over it, when you're back under it, that sort of thing. And then the account breakdown. So this one's showing our total expenses, and in this case most of it is rent, and then there's a chunk is insurance, and then utilities and interest and water, and you know, so you can see what this, either this organization or this program within the organization is spending all their funds on, and see that graphically, and you can see that for actuals, you can see that for budgets. So different ways of looking at that data, and I think that's one of the benefits of something like Calxa, in that you've got all that display and presentation prepared for you. You don't have to create it like you do with a spreadsheet. So let's just switch over to Calxa. Let me find my Calxa, and I'll give you the quick tour just so you can have a look around and see what it does, how it works. Excuse me. So we've got a dashboard, and then I'm going to start with budgets. Where's my budget screen? I've lost it. I've lost my budget screen. Okay, it's all right. I'll find it. So I've lost it completely because I haven't been doing anything for. That's all right. It's a security thing. If you're inactive for more than 30 minutes, it signs you out. So as I said, with budgets, you can budget at the organization level or at the cost center level. And with the organization budget, you can use this consolidation setting to say, consolidate all my projects. And then that organization budget then becomes read-only, and it just adds up all the project budgets, and then you can edit those one by one here, and just, you know, put numbers in. You can do things like put something in the total, and it will spread it evenly if there's nothing there. It'll spread it proportionally if there's existing numbers there, that sort of thing. I mentioned the flexibility of date ranges. So it defaults to whatever your financial year is in your accounting system, but you can change that. So I can budget for this for the calendar year if I want to, or if I've got a program that starts in March and ends in August 2020, I can set that as the date range if I want, and then put all my budgets in, and it doesn't matter that goes across a financial year. And then I can move backwards and forwards from one period to the next. Multiple versions of the budget. So if I just go into manage budgets here. So my initial budget at the beginning that I start the year with, I've locked. So I can lock that and make it read only. So only I, as the administrator, can then unlock it. Other users can't make changes to it. So once it's been signed off by the board, I say, that's it. We're not going to change that anymore. You can copy a budget. So you just right click, copy budget. So if you're doing a scenario like you're buying a big bus, you just create a copy of the budget, make changes to it, and then you can run reports and see what's the effect on cash flow, for example, of running this particular budget. Then I'll show you the budget factory. So under budget tools, budget factory, let's do a profit and loss. We'll do it by department. Just tick my department. This is 01, but it's the same whether it's Xero, MYOB, QuickBooks, doesn't matter. Base it on actuals for 2018, or I could base it on actuals for 2019 actually. Let's do that. It tells me I've only got actuals up until February, but it's going to use my budget for the rest of the year, so I still get a complete budget for next year. Put it into my initial budget for 2020 and 2021. Oh, it's locked. Let's put it into my current forecast. It does tell me that I've got existing data there and I'm going to overwrite it, but that's okay. And then, as I said, we can do a simple, 5% increase or 3% increase or a 2.5% increase, and it will show you what the net profit's going to be. Go next step, and then whether you had 5 or 100 business units there and 2 years or 10 years, if you just go save budget, in a minute or two, it'll create that draft budget for next year. So very easy to do a quick bulk creation of those budgets. Now, when it comes to exporting budgets, you just go to budget tools, export budget, and select which budget version. I'm going to export my current forecast and which project or department, and you can select multiple there. So I could select self-defense, Commonwealth, budget type. I just want the P&L accounts. I want to send it to Excel. I want a monthly option, not an annual one. And then what date range do I want to export it for? And I go export budget and it will export that. Then you manipulate it in Excel. And here's one I prepared earlier. And I have tried as best as I can to follow the standards with this one. And the first thing I did before I locked it off was it gave me the whole chart of accounts. So it's basically got, excuse me, the different business units, the account number, the account name, and it gave me the whole chart of accounts. So before I started protecting this workshop, because I've protected this whole sheet so that it can't be edited, because I want to restrict where my users do the editing. Before I did that, I removed all the unnecessary accounts. So the department manager for this particular program only has responsibility for the expenses. So I got rid of the income accounts, the cost of sales accounts, the other income, other expenses. There are some accounts that don't apply to this particular program, so I removed those as well to give him as simple a list as possible, ready for import. And then on my assumptions sheet here, this is where he does his data entry. Now, I'll come back to that in a moment, but one of the key things in the standards about documenting your spreadsheet is to have a cover page. And if you've got lots of sheets, so if you had lots of output sheets, lots of assumption sheets of different types and presentation sheets, put them in sections and have a cover page for each section. Yeah, so it describes what that section is about, and it groups all the sheets in that section together. So here I've got what's the name of this, and I've called it departmental budget. You know, I'd probably give it a department name, and then who it was prepared by, when it was last modified, and then if you're clever, you can put a formula in there that will automatically update the last modified date, and then I just manage versions myself, and I would probably also document in here where I'd made changes, and especially if I've made significant changes. The other thing to do is to use range names so your formulas become readable. So here, if you haven't used range names before, basically you just type here the name of the range. So if I wanted to be, if I wanted to name this as prepared by, for example, I don't think it can have spaces in it. So I've just, did that work? No, it didn't work. Prepared by. I can't do that because it's read only. I'm too clever for my own good. I've got a link here to the table of contents, which takes me to this page here, which has links to all the other pages. If I just unprotect this one for a moment, so what I've done here is I've given it a heading, which is the table of contents, and I've got a formula here, which is equals model name. So if I just delete that for a moment and go equals, F3 gives you a list of all the range names you've selected, and I go model name. And then, so instead of saying, you know, equals cover page sheet B3 or whatever, it's really clear what that is. It's the name of this spreadsheet model. And then with the assumptions, somewhere there's probably on the menu, you can create a link, but I've been a keyboard user for a long time, so I go Control K when I want to do hyperlinks, and then you can just go hyperlink to a page in this document, select the assumptions tab and click OK, and it will take you there. So then you can put a list of all the sheets you've got here, so you can easily find your way around this spreadsheet. And then I'm going to protect that sheet again. If I was giving it to someone else, I'd probably put a password on it so they can't just unprotect it. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose. But the color coding guide in the standards suggests that anything that's a constant, so it's basically data that's not a form. No, let's start again. Formulas should have black font. Constants have blue fonts. So constant is something that's entered, or it's a label like here. And anything that's a combination of formula plus constant is in green. So this one here, for example, I've got a formula there that says assumptions for, so it's containing some text and then the model name. So that's in green, so you know that it's a combination of data plus a formula. The standards have guides on coloring. So the output screen, for example, should be all white background, but the assumptions where you put in your data should be a light gray, except for where people put data in, and that should be a white background. So it's really obvious here which cells I can edit and which ones I can't. And so my wages and salaries here, I've got formulas which reference the staff numbers and salaries and the superannuation rate and training allowance down here. And what I've done is I've named this range here as L1 for level 1 quantity. And this one here is L1 salary. So when I've created my formula here, it's the level 1 quantity times the level 1 salary divided by 12, plus the level 2 quantity divided by the level 2 salary divided by 12. So it makes it a lot easier to read that formula than to have just A1 times A2 plus A3 times A4. I know I'm multiplying quantities by salaries, yeah? And if I was doing this really well, I probably would have put level 1, written out level 1 rather than L1, but even those of us who think we're good take shortcuts sometimes. So the user comes along and puts in the number of staff and their salaries down here, and then it calculates the total wages there. And then they put in the budget for the other sections here. They save it. And then I go back to Calxa and I go import budget. And if I'm good, I will remember where I put it, and it wasn't there. It was there in my connecting up folder. And then ask me which budget do I want to update. I want to update my current forecast. And which sheet do I want to bring in? And it's the output sheet. And import that budget. All successful. And I think, if I remember rightly, let's go current financial year. Next financial year is the ones I wanted. And so these numbers here, and that's my repairs and maintenance. There's my wages. If I just bring up my spreadsheet again, so the output sheet is where it's brought that from. You'll see I've got 308,000 for wages there in July, which has come into the wages column there. So it's, excuse me, imported the budgets from the spreadsheet for just the rows that I've included in that sheet, and left everything else, all the income accounts which the department manager wasn't responsible for. The admin person puts those in, they all stay as they are. So it's about combining the flexibility of what you can do with formulas in Excel in a carefully structured spreadsheet, but then bringing that in to the structure of Calxa, so then you've got those budgets in there. You import them for each department. That automatically rolls up to the organization budget, and then you go and run your reports. And with reports in Calxa, we give you lots of choices. There's 120 something different report templates, but the idea is that you can narrow them down here quite easily, and select the ones you want, and then you add them to a report bundle. And once you've created that bundle of reports, it saves all your configuration. You just say, I want to run this for March or November or whenever, and go run bundle. Or you can actually automate and schedule that to be emailed to you at a particular point in time. And the sort of things you get in a bundle I've got a cover page, and I'll just go through this quickly because I want to leave some time for some questions. But we've got the unspent budget there, the profit and loss forecasts, so actuals year to date, budget for the rest of the year, and there's lots of different reports you can do. You can do a cash flow forecast, all based on that budget data that we've put in. So it's about, and that's the business unit summary with that high level summary, wages to turnover. So there's some KPI information there, expenses by business unit. So there's lots of, it's about using that data to provide the people in your organization with the information they want once you've got it in there. So our goal has always been to make it easier to create those budgets, and then to give you multiple ways of using and reporting on that afterwards. Let's just go back to my presentation, just make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Okay, next steps. I was actually going to change the order of those. If you want to look more at Calxa, it makes sense to just sign up for the free trial, which you can find on our website, which is calxa.com, and 30-day free trial. You can connect it to your own data and see how it works for yourself. For those of you in the small and medium category, we do a donation program through our friends at Connecting Up. So you'll find information on that on the Connecting Up website. Basically, it's turnover of less than $1 million, and you qualify for the donation. Those of you who don't qualify for the donation, Connecting Up will sell your Calxa at a discounted price. So I guess questions, Tina? Anybody want to know anything else?
Thanks, Mick. We do have a few questions. So the first one is SSRB available in New Zealand as well, or only in Australia?
Yes, it's let me see if I can find the website. I think it's an international organization. There you go, ssrb.org. And they've got some really good information there. So I think on the standards, their best practice modeling, spreadsheet modeling, they've got some examples there, and you can view the standards online or download a PDF. And I think it's really good stuff for getting consistency into your spreadsheets. And yep, it's an international organization. I don't even know where they're based. And they don't tell you. No idea.
Okay, the next one isn't really a question, it's just a statement. They say that they're preparing a treasurer's report for incorporated board meetings, and they have 6 meetings a year.
Yes, okay. If I was automating that, in our Calxa workflows, we only have options of daily, weekly, or monthly to automate sending reports. What I would probably do if you're the preparer is just set it to monthly, so it comes to you every month, and then every second month you just forward it to the treasurer or the board, whoever needs it.
That's it for questions.
That's it.
Yep.
Surely we can encourage somebody else to ask something.
Well, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put it into the questions box on your webinar panel. We'll just give them another minute and see if anybody comes up with anything. Okay, looks like we don't have any questions. So was there anything that you wanted to add, Mick, before I finish off the webinar?
No, not really. Just yeah, if you want to find out more information about Calxa, you'll either find us on the Connecting Up website or calxa.com, and there's a free trial there. And I think right down at the bottom in the footer of the website, there's the donations page there that gives you information about the donations. And we started off doing the donations in 2011 with a plan to give away $1 million worth. We're up to 1.7 so far. Yeah, oh, there's my ugly face on the video talking with, I think I was talking to Josh from Connecting Up then. So yeah, so there's information there. There's a link to the TechSoup site in New Zealand or the Connecting Up site in Australia to apply and read the fine print and all that sort of stuff. But
And I'll send all this information out to everybody with
yep.
the recording as well. So I'll give you all the links.
Yeah.
Great.
So thank you everybody for your time.
So thank you, Mick, for presenting today, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you've all learnt a lot from the presentation. If you do have any questions that come to mind later on or any feedback about the webinar, please send that through to events@connectingup.org and we will answer those questions offline. Don't forget that the recording will be available on the website very shortly and a link will be sent to you, so keep an eye out on your inbox. Again, thank you for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks, Mick. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tina.